Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. I am John Pollock, and there's lots to discuss today with John Ramdine and Robin Black. We are coming off one of the best UFC cards of the year with the show in New Orleans, and we'll discuss Dan Henderson's huge victory, a Fight of the Year candidate in the featherweight division, and another W for Big Ben. Dan Henderson got a much-needed victory on Saturday and only needed 28 seconds to do so as he connected with a series of right hands on Tim Boetsch, dropping him with an uppercut and finishing him with strikes for the first-round stoppage. It was Henderson's first win since March of last year after losses to Daniel Cormier and then cutting down to middleweight earlier this year and losing to Gegard Mousasi this past January. Henderson has 2 more fights on his UFC deal and intends to fulfill that contract. Ben Rothwell made it 3 in a row on Saturday as he added Matt Mitrione to that streak. Mitrione was looking the better of the two standing early on when all of a sudden he shot in for a takedown and Rothwell would apply a fight-ending choke which Mitrione tapped furiously to using both hands. After the fight, Rothwell stated that he felt he and Andrei Arlovski should fight next, with Arlovski riding a 5-fight win streak. And finally, Dustin Poirier returned to his home state of Louisiana on Saturday night and made short work of Yancy Medeiros, who came in overweight for their lightweight fight. The left kick to the body from Poirier would cripple Medeiros, who was left open for the striking of Poirier, and the fight was over at the 2:38 mark of the opening round. It was Poirier's second win since returning to 155 pounds earlier this year. Saturday, we are live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for a 1-hour pre-fight show heading into UFC 188 with John Ramdine, Robin Black, and myself, and special guest UFC heavyweight Stipe Miocic on the program. And then immediately after the main event, flip it back to Fight Network for a live post-fight show running through all the fights from Mexico City. We are here with John Ramdine and Robin Black to chat about Saturday's card. Oh my God, plug your nose. This joint got stunk out on Saturday night. Probably the best fight card of the year, I will go so far as to say. Incredible main card of action. I think we had a grand total of 21 minutes and 8 seconds of fight time, 14:10 of which was for one fight with Brian Ortega and Thiago Tavares, which you could definitely say a fight of the year contender. Just an excellent card from New Orleans, I thought.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why it was so good is because there's such low expectations. We heard going in, Dan Henderson only won one fight in his last 5 or 6 fights. Same with Tim Boetsch, only a couple of victories in his last number. How is Dustin Poirier going to look? Blah, blah. There's all these questions. And because the expectations are so low, and then you get these ridiculous finishes, that it has this feeling of a big show. Because, I mean, it is one of the best fight cards of the year, but you have to look back at the Chris Weidman, Vitor Belfort card. And Daniel Cormier and Anthony Johnson. That card was sensational.
Last month,
just really, really good for them. Yeah, exactly.
Finishes are awesome, and spectacle is awesome, and just crazy outcomes are awesome. But when that happens, people are often like, well, how did this happen? How do we make this all fights? Listen, that's not the motivation. It isn't, because all we have to do to get that is just have horrible matchmaking. Just have somebody really killer against somebody not that good, and we'll see spectacle knockouts every single night. So that isn't how you do it. And one that people are searching for, they're like, wow, they used the smaller cage. Let's always use the smaller cage. Smaller cage does increase the amount of finishes, but the smaller cage also makes it easier to get to the cage. It's a shorter distance to the cage. You always want to find explanations. We should just enjoy what a great night it is. And it is interesting. Finishes, like I said, are awesome. But the fight of the night was the one that went 14 minutes.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, it just all around, up and down, awesomeness.
Yeah, very big performance from Brian Ortega. And Thiago Tavares, I mean, going into that third round, we had one judge who had Tavares up 2 rounds, one that had Ortega up 2 rounds, and the other had it even going into the third. So it was all over the place had Ortega not gotten that finish. But I think for John Ramdine scoring under the Pride system, Brian Ortega was winning that fight.
Well, you look at damage and you look at control, and he was. It seemed like Tavares kind of, as much as he was competitive, it was never
volume.
Exactly,
you have to look at Tavares,
yeah,
and
right.
I think you can easily make the case Tavares won the first 2 rounds.
But it comes down to, yes, volume is important, but it's which strikes are the most damaging, which positions are the most damaging, and that's when I look at a fight. That's what I look at.
The one that creates a third eyebrow.
Yes, exactly.
It is. It's fun to talk about these. The better things are, the longer it takes to really dive into them. And I'm going to just sell right now, Ramdine and mine's show, 5 rounds today. It's an hour. And we're going to dig into the cage size, and we're going to dig into the guard of Ortega. Because why was one judge saying it was 2 rounds for one guy, 1-2 for the other? We're not understanding how that guard works. We're not understanding. It's only been a year or two since we didn't see a lot of guard play, and in that time, some judges aren't quite sure what to make of it, and fighters are so busy training get back up, get back up, get back up, that the guy on top is training don't let him get back up, don't let him get back up. It's a good time to sneak in and have a good offensive guard. The game changes really rapidly, man. Ortega's guard was super cool, and people are going to take notice of that.
Let's chat about Dan Henderson, because he was the biggest question mark going into this fight. A 28-second knockout victory over Tim Boetsch. He has 2 fights remaining on his UFC deal. He fully intends to fulfill those. And I think this solidifies that, the fact that he is going to get 2 more middleweight fights, and I think it's all key to the matchmaking. Dan Henderson is somebody that you can still headline cards with, such as this past Saturday night, and I think that this win really propels him, that he can stay in that kind of a role for a fight night card or be a complement on a pay-per-view.
Yeah, and you say the question mark, you know, he's got 2 fights left. Well, I don't know if they're necessarily going to be at middleweight. It's wherever Dan Henderson can get the biggest fights. He understands that he is one of the top 10 biggest stars in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And in the past, he had a fight with Husamar Polaris. He's like, who am I fighting?
Who is this?
Exactly. I want the biggest names, and I think the UFC recognizes that Dan Henderson is the type of fighter that he is. So you can use him at 185 pounds, you can use him at 205 pounds, and you can use him at heavyweight. A rematch with Rampage, a fight with Roy Nelson. There are so many fights that you can give Dan Henderson that are going to be intriguing.
The Cormier fight, his last fight at 205, I mean, he came in at 199 pounds for that fight.
He doesn't care. He knocked out Fedor.
Well,
Dan Cormier is the light heavyweight champion of the world.
Hey, listen, I'm a huge Dan Henderson fan. That was wonderful to see for a pioneer like that, a great like that, to see him do that. What I hope doesn't happen is that every little up-and-comer looks and goes, I still think I can beat, and everybody wants to use Dan as a stepping stone. Screw that, Dan Henderson. You pick the fights you want. Go select some good fights that you want to have, and go enjoy your last 2 fights. And if you want to have some more, I'm behind you. I know a lot of people are.
Quick thought on Ben Rothwell. That's his 3rd consecutive victory. Matt Mitrione, I mean, just a frustrating performance, because he was looking good on his feet, and then all of a sudden
it was a mistake.
Gets caught. Yeah, it was. He'll be the first one to admit it. He just a dumb mistake that he owned up to making. But for Ben Rothwell now, suddenly he's in that same mix that I think Stipe Miocic and Andrei Arlovski find themselves in that kind of on-deck circle. All 3 of them, I think, gunning for a heavyweight title fight.
Very true, and that's why Ben Rothwell called out Andrei Arlovski. He's got some unfinished business. They fought before in Affliction. Let's have them do it in the UFC.
Can we agree that interview was terrible?
Hey, we got Stipe here all week, so stay locked here. We got him all week long.
Stipe Week on Fight Network. And we have more Fight News Now Extra coming up next.